I don't know. We don't really have fun around here.
No fun? Oh man, I'm in the wrong podcast. It sounded so much fun on the phone that, you know.
Did he spin it up to be something more than what it is? He's a good salesperson.
No. I've been listening. I pay attention to the podcast. I will not say that I'm a completist yet, but I'll get there eventually.
We're so far. There's so many that are coming out too. Like they're just I got this weird offset, like a 5-week offset or something. I'm still trying to decide, do I keep that or do I just blow through them and just release them all at one time?
You're gonna want that in about 2 months.
Yeah, I'm like, do we save that for the holidays and then take a break for a little while and eat into that, or?
Yep. Hey, look, there's Thanksgiving. Right by. Nobody's available. Weird.
Yeah. It's still September. We cannot be talking about the holidays yet.
No, just, I mean, we're all future thinkers, right? I think about the future a little bit, sometimes farther in the future than, tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But.
Well, our hot topics lately have been, I've been crapping all over terms and claiming that everything is overused, like teams is overused, leadership is overused. What was one of the other ones I said yesterday? Servant leadership was another one that I hated.
Servant leadership. I love that one. I just wish you could find one person that practiced it appropriately. That would be so nice. They do practice the term, but I don't think they're using it the way I don't think it means what they think it means.
No,
the saying goes.
No, they don't. What's really funny is I feel like that's a term that's like specific to our space, because I was talking to somebody one time and mentioned that and they're like, what is that? And I'm like, you don't know what that is? Why? What? And then I had to explain it, which irritated the crap out of me, by the way. So I was annoyed that I said the word.
I can imagine. So is it an IT space thing, you think?
I'm kind of wondering if it is. I can't imagine. It's got to be founded in some studies that were done in the 60s, though, like a lot of that stuff. Like, there's no way this is like a new term.
Well, like everything in business, right? It just goes through the cycle and comes out the other end with a new name and same practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I did learn a new term yesterday evening, which was operant conditioning. I'd never heard that before.
I have not.
I've heard it fly by. What's your definition of operant conditioning?
Well, it's things like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, a punishment system. So it's like conditioning you to behaviorally respond to things.
In the right way, that people are like, you're being conditioned to...
Yeah, in a way that they want, yeah.
So is that where like ghosting comes in handy and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to ghost this person and make them seek me out now. And, I won't give them the things that they just asked for nicely. I will make them dig it out.
How often do you ghost people, Peter?
Never. I'm not a ghoster.
Okay.
To be honest.
Have you ever been ghosted?
I've certainly I've drifted apart, but I don't think I've ever ghosted. Like I've never gone like cold turkey ghosting. If there was a line in the sand, I was well aware that the line was being drawn at the time and like, oh, okay, that's it. But no, I've never been ghosted. But yeah, everybody gets busy and it's like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
How little like tonight I'm skipping some of a swim meet to be here. And
we could have rescheduled. This is not supposed to interfere with your life.
No. You're doing me a favor. So you're welcome.
Awesome.
And if my kids ever hear this, it's not that I don't love attending and love watching them. It's the other 45 other swimmers that are annoying.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know that those things were all grouped together. because negative reinforcement's actually one of my favorites. Because
Okay.
it's like used. Most people think the negative reinforcement. I think they switch up. They combine punishment and negative reinforcement together. But negative reinforcement is like you stop doing a thing that's making somebody uncomfortable, or
And that
like,
that reinforces it.
it reinforces the behavior. Like, so it's commonly used in training animals. So like if you're too close to an animal and you can tell that it's like stressed out, you take a step back, which is negative reinforcement. So you're removing something
Okay.
to reinforce the behavior that you're not a threat to them, as an example.
Okay. Well, that I certainly, I don't know if I've ever, I'm sure I've been like, as you go through life, you find out that sometimes you're the sucker and in the world. Like, oh, I've been believing that for 6 months. Wow. What, and you get, as you get older, you get more and more jaded, right? And like, oh, I don't believe anything anymore until it's 6 months later and proven. But I'm more of a positive reinforcement guy. I've been finding that a lot. And I will say that the younger people that I've worked with, very into positive reinforcement, like more than expected. Like, oh, good job, kind of thing, right? Like, oh, you did that really well. Like, yeah, but that nobody's ever complimented, a code check-in or anything like that before. But
I
I've
wonder
had
if
that
it's
happen.
a combination of like these things being put into practice. This, we've learned so much over the last 20 years, 30 years,
Right.
40 years of, how our brains work and how people develop, that now it's actually being utilized. Like, I mean, my parents are boomers, and it's not like my parents weren't like mean, but like they definitely have like boomerish tendencies for sure. Like, I felt like my parents were fairly positive, and my grandparents, who were the greatest gen, like they're all positive and stuff, but it's not like they talk about today. Like, you can still see the gaps when you learn about it.
Right.
And that's one of the things you can learn, that the positive reinforcement, like labeled praise. So like, which is one of my favorite ones to use. So very specific praise, not like good job, but like you talked about, I mean, even like good job on that code check-in, I'm assuming that you would take it even farther and talk about a specific piece of their check-in or
Of that
whatever.
check-in and
Yeah.
say, wow, that was really good thinking
Yeah.
there. That stuff you did there. Yeah. And I'm all for it. I mean, positive, it feels much better than,
Punishment.
well, or the just the blind denial, like, oh, you're this, code check-in example, denied, right? Like, denied for what? Just denied. You did it wrong. Go try again. Okay. I mean, and that's pretty rare in business. Usually they have some tiny quirk that they've taken a shot at, and that's okay.
I'm not a developer, but I have seen that. My favorite one, I was at a place and they were onboarding 2 new developers, and the person's like, well, you just, the new people are asking like, how do you want this to be done so that we don't have to play these games of code check-in Nazi, right? And the person's response was like, I'm just gonna redline it anyway, so it doesn't matter what you do. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
So is that negative reinforcement, or is that just punishment? I'm not
That's
sure which
just-
one that is.
That person was a douche. Oh my gosh. Steve,
Would I know who that person was?
Yeah, 100%.
I'm like, I think I know that. I think I remember that coming up. Yeah.
Yep. Oh yeah.
I've probably never worked with them, and I've probably worked with them, like, not that person specifically, but I've certainly worked with the type where, yeah, like, why? What does that teach anybody? Just because your parents did that to you on your code check-ins doesn't mean that's what you got to do to your kids, right?
Yeah.
It's all part of the posturing.
Well, I mean, isn't it just better to be better than like be a superstar coder and not
Right.
just a dick about things, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But we've all been there. We've all worked with that person, and it's tough to get out of. But yeah, I'm really finding the positive stuff is really helping quite a bit, surprisingly.
It's good that you're figuring out how to work with like the younger generations too, because that's like it seems like it's a really huge miss for a lot of people right now. They don't understand anything about them or how to work with them or how to motivate them.
Well, yeah, and like I don't know how old you guys are, but the people that I'm working with didn't exist when I graduated from college and got my first job, right? Like they didn't even exist. I've got more experience than they have on this earth, and it's hard, you know.
I'm not quite there yet. I still we like to. Steve's nickname is Grandpa Steve.
Well, and yeah, I mean, every day there's somebody born that hasn't seen the Flintstones, as you know, a famous turn of phrase, right? And yeah, every day somebody's doing something new.
I feel like I've kind of given up on that because like my kids don't care about that stuff. Like, so I don't go out of my way to tell them anything about how it was like 20 years ago or anything.
No.
My favorite was we did find an old phone, like an old corded phone that was like translucent and a different color, you know, back
nice.
20 years ago, because that was fancy, like a landline. And we set it on the table and we were like, how would you use this? And they were just like, what is that? None of them would touch it. And then we showed them, they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, you punch in the numbers. Like,
it's like on your screen, you just hit it and it makes a noise.
That's funny. I was the other night I was at a local watering hole. A friend of mine called me and said, hey, he works for a brewery. And he said, hey, I'm going to be at this place. You know, do you want to come by and, you know, have some beers and hang out? I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And I get there, and so he's doing his, you know, shtick where he's handing out beers to people, free taste testing, that sort of thing. And these young ladies come up to the area where we're sitting, because he's giving out swag too, right?
Oh, nice.
And one of them is wearing a local higher education sweatshirt or whatever. And he's like, oh, did you go there? And she goes, yeah, I class of 2021. You know, she was all excited. And I was like, I went there. And she's like, oh, really? And I'm like, class of 89. You know, same thing you're talking about. She wasn't even alive then.
Right. Didn't even exist, right?
Yep.
And it's crazy. And they're drinking now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like my kids are all they're Gen Z and Gen A, and like I like Gen Z because they're like I'm the oldest of the millennials almost, and so it's like that's what we should have been, is I feel like Gen Z, but like I think we were kind of beat down quite a bit, you know. It's like, again, like my parents and my grandparents were teaching me how things worked for them. And then within 10 years of getting that advice, it was completely out the window and obsolete and just doesn't work. And so it's like, then we have to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to do all this stuff? And, you know, working super hard and being upset. So like, I love Gen Z. Plus the millennials are the ones that are teaching Gen Z to throw everything and burn it down.
to not get on the treadmill and go as fast as you can.
Yeah
That's been a nice change. Like,
yes,
some of these people are like, oh yeah, and I'm taking this day off and this day off. I'm like, you're what? I have no idea what that's like.
Yeah, it's super weird. I mean, even like 8 years ago, even 10 years ago at the most, like, I've never heard anybody say the term cutting their teeth for the last like 5 years, right? Like that's but that's what it was like being at a place where you're trying to triage an issue or something and you're working with an executive and they're like, well, we haven't figured it out yet. And the executive's like, I guess you guys are going to figure it out this weekend. And you're like, I guess we're going to figure it out this weekend. Working Labor Day, working crazy. I've been pretty good. I only do everything once. Like I've only worked one Labor Day, never do it again.
Oh, I don't think I've ever worked a Labor Day. I've taken a 4-day weekend for Christmas before. That was super fun.
A 4-day weekend for Christmas?
Yeah, that was my Christmas holiday. It was 4-day weekend.
Oh.
Like, all right.
Woo. There was not a lot going on during that time, though, so.
Yeah, exactly. Except if your deadline is like approaching in the first quarter and you are behind, you are going to be working, 70-hour weeks and at the end of the year. That's super fun.
That's true. I did block out the trauma of having an entire company cancel Christmas recently for Steve was there.
They canceled Christmas?
They did. It was like horrific because my grandpa every year would joke they canceled Christmas, and then they literally canceled the holiday. People, they're like, you can't go on vacation, you can't take time off, you gotta be here, we gotta get this done. I'm like, this is insane.
Right. And like your lack of planning does not isn't an emergency on my part anymore, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's tough though. It's tough to switch to that mentality of like, I mean, I don't know. You guys have probably put in 80-hour weeks before, 90-hour weeks, multiple of them in a row. I don't see, anybody Gen Z, Gen A, they'd be like, over what? What is that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So you had mentioned, Peter, that you work with these younger folks.
Mm-hmm.
And that got me thinking, like, I hardly work with, I'm struggling to think of young people that I work with in the last, 4 years. Like,
wow.
I'm thinking to the teams I've been on, there are very, very few young people.
Are you working in the mining industry or?
No. And maybe I'm just not thinking that clearly, but I'm sitting here going, I can think of maybe 2 or 3 that I think were pretty young in my mind.
Nobody fresh out of college?
Not for a few years.
Because I've worked with somebody who, it's been a couple years, but yeah, this is your first job and welcome to the team.
Yeah. I mean, it's been probably 4 years since I worked with anyone fresh out of college. And that was back when I consciously was hiring interns.
Wow.
Speaking of that, that's a person who ghosted me, interestingly enough. Great story. I'm interested in your perspective on this, the two of you. So had this intern. He worked out pretty well. He was very professional, right out of college. He still had a year left in college when he interned. So he was going to go back to college and then he was going to finish out his year. And so the offer was for the next summer, right?
Sure.
And the way the program worked is after it was over, he left, went back to school, and then our HR department would get together with all the people who had an intern and say, yes, should we yes, extend an offer, or no, should we not extend one? And I was like, yeah, he was very good. He, really worked out well. And they're like, okay, great. We'll extend him an offer. And then 3 weeks go by and HR person says, hey, Steve, have you heard from this person? And I'm like, no, should I? And she says, well, I've extended this offer and I haven't heard from him. And I went, okay, well, I know he was doing this one trip. I'll reach out to him. I reached out to him. Nothing. A couple months later go by. We're both the HR person and myself are reaching out to him. Nothing. Then I have a nephew who's connected to him on LinkedIn, and I'm like, oh, great, maybe he knows him. So I talk to my nephew and I say, hey, do you know this person? He's like, oh yeah, he and I were good friends in like middle school. I know him really
Okay.
well. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, here's what's going on. Do you know, did something happen to him? And he's like, well, I don't know. I'll reach out to him. He reached out to him, nothing.
Nothing.
And he later, like, I checked to see is he still around? And sure enough, he's on LinkedIn and he's doing something else, not in the industry. But it was the weirdest thing.
He wasn't a new started my new monk internship out at the
No,
the mountain, the Himalayas.
no, it doesn't say that he's in a cult or anything.
Okay.
But it was the strangest thing. And I thought, well, maybe he was perhaps having some mental health issues, which I'm like, hey, totally get that.
Right.
Just reach out to me. We'll support you in whatever way we can. Not a problem. But
Even I have received your message and no longer wish to communicate.
right.
Right. That would have been
Could be
great.
that.
Like,
Could be that. I have no idea. So there's that reminded me, the intern, which was probably him, and the intern the following year was the last time I worked with somebody really young.
wow. Well, okay. So your ghosting story reminded me of my one ghosting experience. And, that was, for a long time I've done technical interviews, right? And you tend to do them over lunch. And so you go to a restaurant and you meet a stranger and you try to do all the things like, oh, this is my company logo is here, and I've got a notebook, so this is probably the guy that's going to be interviewing you. And then occasionally you get one or two others that are doing it at the restaurant. And so I'm sitting there and I've gotten a table and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. And I have had somebody call like 20 minutes after and say, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. I'm almost there. And then I've had somebody take a really, really long time. Like, I don't know if they were going to the McDonald's in, Duluth instead of the McDonald's that, next to the company or something like that. But anyway, nothing, not a word. Fortunately, the recruiter was actually having lunch at the restaurant. And so I went over and said, hey, I'm at the right place, right? Yep. Nothing. Recruiter reached out, nothing. Weeks go by. Finally, somebody made a connection, but I've never like just say no to the interview. Yes, you'll never work for that company by doing that, right? Like, that's a great way to never ever accidentally work for them, but like maybe this is the boomer mentality, but I would never do that to somebody ever.
Right.
Like, hey, by the way, I'm not going to be there today. And I never want to talk to you guys again or whatever, right?
Yeah.
My life has changed. I'm going to a monastery and I've seen the light. That good talk.
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about that. You're like, you're obviously never going to be a reference for this person ever.
No, never.
And you could quite potentially be a negative reference if someone says, hey, Peter, I'm interviewing this one guy. Do you know anything about him? You'd be like, yes, I do.
Boy, do I know something about him.
Yeah. And same thing with the gentleman that the intern, he
Right.
could have just said, hey, I politely decline. Thanks. I'm going to go do something else. I still would have been a reference for him.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, he just, like, why did he have an internship? And why did he stay for the whole time?
Yep.
I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I wonder if it's maybe geographical too. Because I feel like I've been thinking about this and I feel like I've been conditioned to do that. But I feel like in other places, that's just kind of how they behave. And so I wonder if like maybe these like we're misinterpreting what's happening. You know what I mean?
Like outside of the U.S.
No, or just even so like if you work with people from like if you're here and you grew up here and you work with people on the East Coast, there's a really good chance that you will be offended by the things that they do and say. But their culture, which is hilarious to say because we're in the same country, but it's like it's not offensive to nobody out there would take offense to those things.
Sure. Yeah, and there are regional differences, that's for sure. And there are some people that really like to come in and espouse their like, I'm from New York, so I'm going to be this way. And as a Midwesterner, I'm like, are you covering your this way with just the fact that you're from New York? Or like, I was a jerk out in New York and I'm a jerk here too, but I'm going to pretend that it's the New York way instead of like, this is how I am. And, there's certainly, there's been a lot of people that have complained about, Minnesota nice or Minnesota, I don't forget what the term is, but like, where you shun the person or quietly, give them the cold shoulder or whatever, right?
Passive aggressive.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit passive aggressive. We are as a people.
Unless you're in your car, then it's just straight up aggressive. So I had long time ago, there was this woman who had moved from New York to here, and we were working at the same store. Her name was spelled like Deborah. It was it was spelled Deborah, like D-E-B. Was it R-A-H?
Sure.
Or there was an O in there somewhere, I think. Deborah, right?
Yep. Right.
The long spelling. Well, she insisted that it was pronounced Deborah. So I'm apologize to anybody named Deborah, but like, and so all of us were like, but it's spelled like Deborah. What are you talking about? She's like, it's Deborah, and we're like, how do you get that?
Just throw an extra letter in there when you sign your employment agreement.
But she did.
Pretend.
The reason I bring that up is because she was also someone who was touting being from New York as like a thing, and we're like, okay, I guess you're from New York,
way, right?
Deborah,
I like it. There's been a few people that have had names that are like, well, that's not how it's spelled, but okay, we'll call you that from now on.
Yeah, we all called her Deborah. We were just giving her a hard time about it. I was at one place where we worked with a woman named Barbara, and she was like a project manager, and there was another project manager that was there, and this project manager had shortened her name to Babs. She called her Babs.
Yes.
And
I love those people.
Barbara lost her mind, and like you could only call her Barbara. I'm like, that's totally fair. I'm like, Babs that's an old school nickname. Like you don't hear that anymore.
But there's a lot of people that are default shorteners, right?
Yeah.
Like, whoa, you're going to shorten that person's name, even though they introduce themselves as, Matthew, and you're going with Matt. Wow, that's impressive.
Yep. I try to, either, if I've never talked to somebody before, but I've been emailed by them, I see what their signature says, and then I'll repeat that, or I will just straight up ask them if I've never met them before and be like, do you prefer, like Nathan or Nate or Peter or Pete?
Right.
I found a lot of them are just like, I don't care.
Well, exactly. If somebody says, hey, Pete, what's going on? I'm not going to have horns come out and flash at them. But my mom trained me for years that my name is Peter. And so it's just really hard to get over. And some people do. Some people go away to college and they come back with, Andrew becomes Andy or something like that. Like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
I guess we can call you Andy, but we've all been trained for 20 years to call you Andrew. So
one thing that's always been weird about that is because I have a friend named Pete. I know him as Pete, but like everybody else that we worked with called him Peter. And so we would be I would say Pete, and other people right after me would say his name, but they would say Peter. And I'm like, well, now I look like I'm being an asshat because everybody else is calling him the formal name.
Yeah. It is. It just goes, names are hard. That's really the final thing, is they're just hard.
Yeah, mine. Nobody knew how. Mine's still fairly unpopular. My parents, they named it very, very not a common name when I was growing up.
They flipped to the end of the book and looked for the
Yeah.
lowest occurrence and chose that one.
And I remember one time, like we had like a family friend. They were like new to the area or something, and so my dad and him like were talking, and my dad's talking about my son Ethan, and this guy was like, "Oh, I have a son named Ethan too," and they were a younger family. And this guy was like, maybe they can get together and play together sometime. My dad's like, I don't think so. I was like 16 and their kid was like 2.
That'll totally work out. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Oh,
It is like having such an uncommon name. It's super weird when you're in like a grocery store somewhere and someone calls out your name. Because, I'm like, well, that's me. There's nobody else here named. It usually is a little kid, but yeah.
yeah, it's getting more popular. I know actually 2 Ethans that in my wife's side of the family. So
Oh, nice.
it's coming back, but
Yeah.
you never know.
All the cool kids are named Ethan.
That's true. That's what I've heard.
Ethan Hawke, Ethan Frome, Ethan Allen.
Those are cool kids.
I had as I was thinking back to my days with the ghosting intern, it
Yeah.
reminded me of another unusual employment experience. We had a gal who joined our organization as kind of a data analyst, data engineer, database person. And she came from a biotech company locally here. And she was at work for, I don't know, about a week, and then she like didn't come in one week, and we get a notification that she's out sick. It's like, okay. And she doesn't come in the next week. And she doesn't come in the next week. And then like the director in our department like contacts her and says, hey, what's going on? And she says, oh, and I don't remember what it was, if she was like really ill or something happened, but she'll be in, the next week. And this went on for like 3 months. Okay.
This ingrown toenail, it just won't go away.
And finally, the director like contacts her and says, hey, either we have to fire you or you have to go on short-term disability or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
And you have until this date to do that. She's like, okay, no, I'll be in. And like the day before the deadline, she goes on short-term disability. So she's on that for like whatever it is, 90 days or something. I don't know what the rules are. So like another 3 months.
He is a brilliant person who is extending the amount of money
Yep.
that's coming from your company.
I think it gets better. So at the end of that, like he and like HR is involved at this point, and they're like, okay, you've got to come back by this date. You have to, or you will be let go.
Right.
And that date comes and goes, and they notify her, okay, you're being let go. And she's like, no, I'll be in tomorrow. He's like, sorry, it's too late. So they cut the cord. And I, of course, being the investigator that I am, she never left that biotech company.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe she was double dipping for like 6 months.
Oh, that's just amazing. So do you think if it had happened during the pandemic, like she would have kept both jobs by just...
Oh, totally. In fact, I could totally see people doing that today. Like you could easily have people double dipping.
Right? Like I work 4 hours here and 4 hours there, and
Yeah.
Couple of days to get it done, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they
That
talked about people doing that, like, at the height of the pandemic.
My favorite is the people the consultants that hire consultants to do their work for them at a cheaper rate. That is a brilliant plan until you get caught and, get taken for fraud. But
Yeah.
up until then, it's super smart.
Was it Ralphie May's got he's got a joke about that where his mom would pay him $20 to mow the lawn. So then he went and found like a neighborhood kid and said that he would pay him $10 to mow the lawn. He's like, so now he makes $10, I make $10, and I'm a supervisor.
I mean, he gets 3 more lawns lined up, and he's,
Yeah.
that's the road to success, right?
Yep.
The entrepreneurial spirit.
But in my heart, I just I envy those people, not, in a oh, that's great. I wish there were more people like that, but just the amazing amount of courage that it takes to do something. I would have broken. I would have taken days off of my other job just to come in and put in a couple of days at my fake job.
Right.
Well, how
Right.
much more time would they have gotten if they'd come in that one day before the deadline? How much more time would they have had?
I have no idea. I have a feeling it was I don't want to show my face at all and have anybody question me.
Right, because they're going to put me in a meeting room and they're going to talk to me.
They're going to
That
put
would-
me through the meat grinder and I don't want to do it.
That would have been a ballsy move for them to
And-
show up and pretend like
Yep.
nothing had happened.
Oh, hey guys, how's it going? Oh, my desk is still here. That's awesome. Nobody's taken it
That
yet.
reminds
That's
me,
great.
I haven't checked for a while, but I'm going to actually see if that person is still at that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, you read about it. You see it on Hollywood all the time, right? It looks so easy, but to go out and do that, just amazing.
It's like that scene from The Office when Michael he was dating the woman that was married, and so everybody wanted him to stop dating her, and he's like, no. And so he stopped caring about everything for that day, which is hilarious because it's only one day. But it's like, to me, this describes that he comes in, they have cake out, it's somebody's birthday, nobody's touched it. He comes in, he grabs a handful of the cake and walks out, and Creed is going, that guy doesn't care about nothing. Like, Creed, who comes out later, is like a murderer and like doesn't actually do any work at the job that he's
Right.
at. So, like,
Yeah.
can't even deal with Michael doing that. That's exactly what it feels like to me. It's like, you have to, and I think even Ryan says that, you have to really not care what people think about you.
Right. Yeah. Well, Steve,
Still there.
still there. Wow.
It says the tenure. So this would have been roughly, I'm going to say 2016, 2017. So that was 5-6 years ago. And it says this person has been at the same company. Doesn't mention the one doesn't mention her side hustle.
Weird.
She's been at the same biotech company for almost 15 years. So
Wow.
right through there.
Straight through.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, do you think like there was a counteroffer situation and they weren't courageous enough not to quit?
Oh, like she was gonna quit, and then they
Yeah.
said, "Oh, we counteroffer," and she didn't want to tell anyone. No, that's a plausible thing that could happen.
Right.
Ethan, it could be Hanlon's razor.
That's the like other like that and personas. Those are like the two things we talk about all the time. Because Hanlon's razor, you know what Hanlon's razor is, right?
Not exactly.
All right. So
You
Steve.
you can attribute something to stupidity more easily than to malicious behavior.
Right.
So
right. Okay.
don't assume it's malicious when stupidity is probably the more likely explanation.
Unless you're
Yes.
me, and now I attribute everything to maliciousness, and
Nice.
stupidity is not an option. Because it's like they're so stupid for so long. Like, at what point does the stupidity become malicious?
Oh, malicious stupidity. That's a new one. We should start that.
Weaponized
Write a book.
incompetence. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a very true truism, I guess. Is, don't attribute maliciousness to everything.
Yeah, it's like, well, assume positive intent, right? I think is the spirit of that
Yeah.
as well. And I think we were talking yesterday, maybe. Yeah, at some point it's like, it's not positive intent. It's negative. Like, they're trying to be malicious, and they might be being malicious because they're stupid and they don't have tools and they're uneducated,
Right.
but it's still malicious and it's not positive intent. That's kind of where I'm at, is just like, how much information do you have to have available to you before, like, you start being held accountable for not utilizing it? Like, that's what I feel like. It's like, Steve, you told an example like a few weeks ago where you're like, this had been laid out for this person and then they just didn't do anything with it.
So you've drawn the entire picture, everything they need to know to make, like, and if you fill in this blank where the exit sign goes on this picture, you'll fill it with exit sign. And they're like, water fountain? No.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I hope
Yeah.
there aren't 3 people having a podcast right now about me and my stupidity at some point. Like, we thought it was malicious, but it turns out he just thought he was doing the right thing.
Oh,
Could be. The other thing is personas. So I suppose we could ask you, because we always got to talk about that. Do you have? We have learned that Jess has a million different personas, which I'm sure you know because you know Jess. So depending on where you're at, or how much liquid courage she's had, like, you get kind of a different version of Jess. We've also found out that she has persona pajamas, or like persona clothes, which is hilarious.
Oh,
And-
dress for success kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I don't have personas. It's the same. I'm the same everywhere. And I thought that only a few people had personas. And then I kind of, like, when we first started this, we were going to talk about it. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, most people don't. Why can't people see that? And then I had an epiphany that I'm the weird one. Everybody else seems to have personas, and I'm the oddball.
I will say that, in the past, going to a meeting, a big meeting, or going to a conference or something like that, yeah, I'm putting on my extrovert hat. I'm going in there and I will be an extrovert. And it's going to cost me a ton of energy. But at the end of the day, I will not be disappointed in myself. I will be able to, like, relax on the drive home and be like, yeah, I did it. So yeah, I will say that I definitely have personas, but as you get older, you get fewer of them because you realize that they're not buying you as much as you think they might be sometimes.
That's an interesting thing I hadn't considered, even though I've heard it. I think it's mostly referred to as masking. Because this is another, I just say crazy stuff. So, like, there's no such thing as an ambivert, right? There's extrovert, introvert. There's no ambivert. And to your point, it's like, where does your energy come from defines you. Like, that's what you define extrovert or introvert as. So, like, if you need to be alone, that's introverted. And I just realized, I wonder if I'm misinterpreting personas as people who have to work with other people but are really introverts and may not know it themselves that they're introverted.
Could
I
be.
wonder if Jess is actually like a closet introvert, but she's very outgoing, but it costs her energy, so she's masking a lot. This will be fun to talk to her when she comes back about it.
It takes energy to put yourself out there, right? It does. And you know, if you've been at a company for a long time, people expect you to be the ambassador or be the welcomer. Like, oh, here's a new person. Just pour yourself out there and you're like, oh yeah, welcome. This is the best, you know. And yeah, you're putting yourself out there and you're using up some storage.
Draining some cycles out of
That's
the
right.
battery. Yep.
Yep.
Are you introverted then, Steve?
I think I am. I
Yeah.
used to think I was very extroverted. It's funny you Peter, you mentioned something that completely resonated with me. You know how our organization has these work from the office days?
Yeah.
Okay. And I typically haven't gone. And by typically, I mean I've never gone. But I was talking to a colleague of ours, Jeff, and he's like, "You should come in for one of these. You know, you'd be great. You know, you'd be able to talk to all these people, and you know, you've just kind of got this personality." And all I'm sitting there listening to him, going, "That just sounds like a lot of work."
Yep.
And so what you just said, where you're expected to be the ambassador, and I'm
Yep.
like, but I don't want to.
But my home desk is so nice.
Right? Yes. I don't have to go anywhere.
That's funny, right? Funny because I'm the opposite. I'm an extrovert, so like I do literally get pumped up by being around people. And
Oh, yeah,
so you're
and-
describing all this stuff. I'm like, that sounds like a blast. However, I too have never been to the office thing either because just I don't know why. I'm I've never gone back to the office. It is what it is. Like this is it. This is how we're doing it now.
Well,
But-
and I do think that, you know, IT technical stuff tends to draw that type of person, either, you know, mind makeup or whatever. But like, look at the trouble that Apple is having. I mean, you've built a $1 billion spaceship for people to come and be at, and you can't even convince those people that, like, hey, just come to the $1 billion spaceship. It'll be awesome. You know, no, I think I'll just, I got this card table set up.
I could do that,
Yeah.
but it would be easier not to.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it does. I mean, you're putting on a hat, and you are. I think I'm putting on a persona, and like it's super easy to have a comfortable conversation with you two here, but I've known you for years, both of you, and you know, there's nobody else around, and so it's easy.
Yeah.
I'll be fine.
And I will say that, you know, some social events are absolutely, I'm totally fine at. And I'm like, okay, this was great fun.
Oh yeah.
But there's part of me that I'm like in those events going, okay, I need to have my shit together for this, you know, and I kind of have to, oh, you know, what can I do to try to include people who, you know, maybe look
Right.
like they're off here,
Yep.
you know, by themselves. Let me try to include them, and sometimes that's very difficult, and it takes some cycles.
Yeah, being the MC for the different people that you know and bringing them together, and
Yep.
yeah, and driving the conversation sometimes, right? Like three introverts walk into a bar.
That's a great opener right there. Look at that. You just go, look, that's perfect. I'm going to use that one.
I mean, my funniest happy hour experience happened years ago. And this was a group of people that had worked together for at least 5 years. So they've worked at the office together for 5 years. They went to a happy hour. It was silence. Like, but, and I'm trying to make conversation, bringing people to, like, I've got my MC hat on, and I'm like, hey guys, how's this doing? How are that? Like, how can you guys go out for a drink and not speak? It was
Since they
unbelievable.
turned their persona off when they stepped out of the office.
Yeah, they just like
They were all out of cycles.
Yeah.
they were all drained apparently,
Yep.
or
Yep.
they were all too afraid to make the first move or to put a little bit of themselves, of their private persona, out for public consumption.
Mhm.
So I'll buy into the persona thing, Ethan. You're kind of on a lonely island there of.
Well, and I think I missed the first episode.
You
when
did.
talked
You
about it.
did.
And so when I came in, you're like, okay, Steve, back me up on this. And I'm like, no, I'm with Jess. I'm on Team Jess.
And you're like, dang it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we talked about it, and so then when we actually recorded it, I had flipped at the last second and like completely caught Jess off guard. I'm pretty sure we talk about it. So then when Steve came on, and we're like, all right, this is what happened. Like, and I thought Steve was maybe gonna be on my side for when I flipped, but no, we just kind of all switched.
Y'all put on different personas and talked about personas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard.
And then there's the expectation of a persona you have, like, which is like what Jeff said. Steve, I have this expectation you're going to come here with this persona.
Right.
And I'm like, but I don't want to.
And that's one of those cases like, oh, I wish I'd have been there at the first one, because then I could feel it out and everybody would be walking around not knowing what's going on. But now I'm walking in and everybody else knows exactly what's going on except for me. And I gotta be me. I gotta be the me that they expect me to be. So that's a challenge for
There's
sure.
a song by that. I gotta be me.
I gotta be me.
Is it by Kermit?
It could be. No, I think it's somebody else.
I think it's a famous singer.
It's like Sammy Davis Jr. or somebody like that.
Frank Sinatra, one of those
Yeah.
old boomer folks, you know.
Right. Yep.
Oh,
You
that's
know, right
funny.
in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, right in your wheelhouse.
Or
yeah.
the perfect, what is it? What generation? What comes before boomer? Greatest generation.
Silent Gen comes.
The greatest gen. Oh, the silent gen?
Silent Gen comes before Boomers.
So
and then
greatest gen, silent gen, boomer. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the Silent Gens, they were the kids that were seen not heard, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know. It's tough. I wish that whoever came up with those terms would have just kept it to themselves for a few more years. Would have been nice. I think things would have been different if we didn't have our own generation.